Support for this program is provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and from viewers like you.
Hello and welcome to Louisiana Public Square. I'm Beth Courtney, president of LPB. Joining me for our discussion tonight on the Reset Louisiana initiative is the leader of one of the groups sponsoring the effort, Robert Travis Scott. Welcome, Robert. Glad to have you back.
And what a great evening and great things to talk about. As president of the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana, or PAR as we're known, it's been my job over the last 10 years to help shine a light on the critical issues facing our state and offer some thoughtful research-based solutions. Well, motivated by a significant statewide election this October, PAR has partnered with the Council for a Better Louisiana, or CABLE, and the Committee of 100 to create an agenda of several recommendations to reset the state's direction.
Well, Robert, with numerous issues to focus on, Reset Louisiana has chosen 4 categories: education, state finances, transportation and infrastructure, and public safety. We've gathered together panelists who can explain the challenges the proposals address and audience members with different opinions about the recommendations. Over the next hour, we'll explore why this October election may be a good time for resetting Louisiana. First, an overview. Louisiana's election in October presents a turning point for the state. That's according to Barry Irwin, president of the Council for a Better Louisiana, or CABLE.
This is kind of a crossroads election, I think, for us in a number of ways, because we have a period of budget stability where we can, not focus on that so much, but focus on the things that'll move us forward.
CABLE is joined with the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana and the Committee of 100 to create the Reset Agenda. It includes long-term policy recommendations in the areas of education, state finances, infrastructure, and criminal justice.
When you look at the various rankings that we have that rank us as states and all the different states around the country, these are parts of all of those rankings. And we feel like these are ones where we can make a difference, where if we actually enact some change, we can move the needle and move the state forward, and things that we believe that people really want to see happen overall.
Among Reset's early education recommendations is ensuring children aged 3 and under enter kindergarten ready to learn. This is possible if the state follows its LA4 program model.
When we started our pre-K program for 4-year-olds like 20 years ago, we had virtually no funding. We had virtually no kids who were in a program like that. Today, we have almost universal access. If we make this a priority and begin to make investments year over year over year, as we've done in other areas, we can make a difference.
High school graduates should be put on a path towards post-secondary education through more programs like dual enrollment.
That's kind of a mind change in K-12 education. Their goal has always been just to graduate. We want to graduate more kids. Now we're saying we want to do more than just graduate. We want them to graduate ready to go to college with a credit while they're already there.
The State Board of Regents has set a goal for 60% of all working age adults to have a degree or high-value credentials by 2030. Currently, only 44% of adults do.
We think that we need to have a really statewide plan, a really concerted effort to make sure that the adults who are out there have opportunities and access to go back into post-secondary education, get a credential, get a degree, whatever it is that they need, but get back into the workforce as quickly as they can.
When it comes to finances, Reset says the state's tax structure should be easier, more competitive, and transparent. Louisiana's 8% corporate tax rate, for example, is much higher than the 5 or 6% rate of other states. But that's not the full story.
Now our tax burden is lower than 8% because we have credits and deductions and exemptions that allow businesses to ratchet down to that. But every one of those is a step they have to go through, and the message that we send with a high rate is that, hey, we're not a very favorable place to come, while secretly and more quietly, we really are a good place to come.
Tax collections could also be simplified. Most states have one tax collector, but in Louisiana, it's divided between the state and collectors in all 64 parishes.
They feel like if they can do a better job than the state or some state entity of collecting taxes and keeping those closer to home. But the truth is, especially when we're getting into e-commerce and Amazon and all the online services, that's very difficult for them to navigate a system like we have.
While Louisiana has been accumulating debt in order to pay for state workers' pensions, Irwin says by 2029, this situation will improve. Reset suggests a blended or hybrid plan for new state hires.
Part a defined benefit like what we have now, sort of like Social Security, which state employees do not have, but also something like a 401k that's portable so that if you move around from one job to the other, as many more people do now, you can take that with you.
While Reset doesn't take a stance on holding another constitutional convention, it does suggest the possible outcomes if there is one.
Mostly it's a simplified, shortened, easier to understand Constitution that gives clarity to the direction we're going, but also gives flexibility to the legislature and other policymakers to make adjustments as needed without every time something happens, we have to go to the voters and pass another constitutional amendment.
In terms of criminal justice, Reset recommends continuing to roll out the reforms that passed in 2017. Public health and safety issues, like the opioid crisis, could also be addressed through a task force similar to the one for justice reinvestment.
We think the state can be a convener of a task force like this to try and work through some of these issues in communities. By and large, it's a community issue more so than it is a state one. But the state can play a big role in trying to bring communities together, help work with them to create frameworks where they can make a difference in their communities, combating opioids and mental health and those types of things.
When it comes to transportation and infrastructure, Reset proposes adjusting the state gasoline tax, which hasn't increased in 30 years.
In terms of the dollars that we have that are available from the gasoline tax going to roads, they are diminished every single year. And part of the reason for that is because our cars become more fuel efficient.
The state could raise registration fees for electric or hybrid vehicles and consider the use of tolls and more private-public partnerships. Without more infrastructure spending, Louisiana risks leaving federal dollars on the table, especially if a national transportation bill passes.
More than likely, the match that we are going to have to get will be larger because the dollars on the table will be larger. And if there's more money out there for us to get, but we need to have the dollars to put up, we're not in a position to compete with that.
Irwin notes that when significant change happens following an election, it's usually within the first 2 years. He hopes that the Reset agenda will provide guidance during the small window of time.
The first couple of years after an election, we've done some big things. So what we're hoping is that when candidates and legislators and the governor, whoever it may be, comes in and wants to do something big, they'll look at these as some of the big things they want to accomplish.
Well, helping us to accomplish big things tonight is our studio audience. It includes representatives from the Louisiana Municipal Association, the Louisiana Budget Project, the Police Jury Association, the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, and we also have an education analyst, a member of the Retired State Employees Association, and CEO of the American Council of Louisiana Engineering Companies. Well, welcome to everyone. Each year, LSU's Public Policy Research Lab conducts its statewide Louisiana survey. Over the last 2 years, residents were questioned about whether several issues relevant to the Reset agenda. Among the findings, when asked their top concerns about the state in 2019, 34% of Louisiana residents named education, 32% said transportation infrastructure, and 25% said the economy, including jobs and the business climate. When asked their opinion on increasing the gasoline tax by 5 cents per gallon, 67% of respondents said they support such a move. But for those surveyed about a gas tax increase of 20 cents per gallon, only 49% supported this amount. When asked their thoughts on criminal justice reform measures passed in 2017, 70% of respondents approved of the changes, 21% disapproved, and 9% were unsure. And in the 2018 survey, When asked about a proposal to rewrite the state's constitution, 46% supported the idea, while 44% opposed it. A new statewide survey conducted this month by pollster Bernie Pincinat shows 81% believe the people of Louisiana should have the opportunity to vote on a revised constitution. So, let's start with our own participants right here tonight. And from your perspective, where do you stand on the Reset Louisiana recommendations, and what do you think a reset means to you and to the folks in your constituency? And I'm going to start off with Logan over here. Logan, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you think of the reset?
Sure. My name is Logan Anderson. I handle government affairs for the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. We're a Chamber of Commerce and an economic developer. To me, reset means a commitment to forcing ourselves to make tough decisions. You know, a lot of the issues on the reset agenda we've known about as a state for years. We've talked about for years. Some of us have worked on these for years, but with the exception of criminal justice reform, where there's been some movement, we've failed to substantively address them. And with a renewed focus on this, some legislative turnover, it's an opportunity to make ourselves make decisions about some of the issues we've been discussing.
Now, why is this especially important for a Chamber of Commerce?
Sure. So for us, you know, we see bringing new business and helping existing businesses grow as fundamental to our mission. And when we are ranked dead last in almost every single area, it becomes incredibly tough to attract new people.
Tough, I get it. Now, we also have with us Neva. Neva, tell us a little bit about your organization and where y'all coming from on this.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Neva Butkus. I'm an education policy analyst at the Louisiana Budget Project. LBP works to assess state policy, specifically through tax and budget, to assess how the state policy decisions impact low and moderate income families. In terms of reset, being an education analyst, a reset to me means that every person in Louisiana has the opportunity to succeed regardless of zip code, race, gender, et cetera. And I commend Reset's agenda for focusing on early childhood to higher ed and making kind of that seamless transition that I think is very important.
So you think it's possible through education to try to reach people in every zip code?
I think education can be a very large part of it, yes.
Great, great. And we also have people here that are representing organizations that are tied to different government entities. We have John Gallagher with us tonight with the Municipal Association. John, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about where you'd be coming from on Reset?
Sure, thank you, Robert. I'm John Gallagher. I'm the Executive Director of the Louisiana Municipal Association, and I do commend Power Cable and the Committee 100 in looking at these issues. When I think of Reset, I think of punching the button and starting over. And when I get that mindset, and when I think about one of the big issues is local tax collection, there's always been a big push over the years for state central collection or having a local collection. And that's a huge issue with our membership. We feel that locals do a great job in collecting sales taxes, and that locals have been over my 20 years at the Capitol leaders in really trying to help bring reform. Back in the 90s with the UTC, the collection portal that collects a lot of the e-commerce sales taxes, the current LULST, and the Remote Sellers Commission that we feel like is making
the LULST. I guess we'll find out what that means.
Uniform
okay, right,
Sales Tax Board,
there we go.
And then the Remote Sellers Commission we feel is working its way that would comply with the Wayfair decision.
The reason you're talking so much about sales tax is because local governments are so dependent on sales tax. That's one of the big issues, isn't
Absolutely,
it?
absolutely.
Right. Okay. We know that's the fact. You know, infrastructure is a big part of the whole Reset program, and I want to ask Doreen to sort of give your perspective on where we're going with Reset. Introduce yourself, Doreen.
I'm Doreen Brasso, and I represent consulting engineers from across the state, and I think it's ironic we're talking about Reset. I remember back in the 80s when Vision 2020 was the brainchild of every policymakers and where we thought we would be in 2020, and now we find ourselves looking back and seeing the same goals that we had then are on our agenda today. And for engineers, we're acutely aware of the condition of the roads and the bridges. And we know that the American Society of Civil Engineers has ranked our roads and bridges a D+. World News and U.S. News and Report has ranked us 48th for the worst roads and bridges. And so we know that if we don't have an action plan for addressing that, you're going to have problems trying to build this economy, because our economy, is dependent upon being able to move commerce in the state, whether it's farm products to ports, whether it's families trying to get to work, to jobs.
So if we don't invest in ourselves, we can't expect businesses to invest in us as well. That's what you're saying.
And the 80s were the last time we even passed a revenue stream, and now we haven't done that since 1984. So I think it's a good time to reset and look at what that funding stream is going to be, because it needs to be significant, it needs to be soon, and it needs to be sustainable.
Okay, and one of the major users of that infrastructure is truckers. And so we have here with us Chance from the Truckers Association. Chance, introduce yourself and tell us what your take is on all this reset proposal.
Sure, thank you. My name is Chance McNeely. I'm the Executive Director of the Louisiana Motor Transport Association, which represents the commercial trucking industry in Louisiana. Obviously, we're a huge user of the state's highway system, and so for us, what I hope reset means is more of a reset of our political thinking, because it's pretty evident to our industry that the fuel tax is the time-tested, correct way to fund infrastructure. From our perspective, our drivers, when they sit in congestion, we are paying them. Their clock is also ticking on how many hours they can drive. And so that creates a lot of problems for us in being efficient. We, of course, deliver everything. So when we have problems, it affects every industry in the state.
So I'm hearing you correctly. Even the people who pay a lot of these taxes are seeing the problem and willing to pay a little bit more to get it fixed. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay. And we also have with us tonight Jeff, and I know you also have a keen interest in infrastructure issues. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what your thoughts are.
Sure. So I'm Jeff Kuntz by trade. I'm Managing Director at Bernard Capital Partners. I'm here primarily, my capacity is head of the Legislative Committee at the Baton Rouge Chamber. And we do, as citizens in both of these capacities, frankly, have a lot of interest in infrastructure, and Reset Louisiana is really setting the stage for the conversation. And my hope is that when the legislative session begins, they focus on these issues, not all of the ancillary issues that seem to occupy much of their time. These are the issues that matter, and if we address these issues, then we can really progress ourselves on 2040. We're not looking back at 2020 with regret.
Great. Well, we have just a little bit more time in this segment, and I want to go to you, Frank, because one of the issues we keep talking about is the state retirement programs. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what your view is on what we need to reset on that front.
My name is Frank Jobert. I'm the Legislative Director for the Retired State Employees Association, and myself a retired state employee, worked for the Department of Corrections for 30 years. Actually, when I hear reset, I think of reform, and in some cases, take away or diminish a benefit that our employees have. And we use that as a recruitment and retention tool. It's an important thing. And the really important thing to take into consideration is that our employees do not have Social Security. And that's the safety net and the foundation for most retirement plans, which we do not have. So I would hope that if we look at anything going forward, we have a seat at the table, we'll get a chance to bring out those notions that our system is different than the private sector for a very valid reason. So I think we need to take those things into account. We need to take into account that we need to represent a certain constituency that is different than the rest of the population, and we want to be able to advocate that position and have a meaningful discussion about it. We're not against reforms, we just need to take all the variables into consideration before something comes out that is really going to adversely affect our population.
And there's middle ground that can be achieved. Our organizations have worked together to find some middle ground on some of these issues.
I'm not one of the ones that's an obstructionist. I want to find that middle ground. I know what we have now maybe is not the best thing for most people, but it's the best thing for our people at this point in time. So until something better comes along, we have to continue advocating and taking the position that we do. Okay. But I'm willing to listen.
Great, that's good talk. We fit one more in for this segment. Allie, introduce yourself.
Yes, hey, I'm Allie Rao, and I'm with the Pelican Institute for Public Policy. We are Louisiana's free market think tank. And as far as how we feel about the reset agenda, I'm thrilled to be here. We are the only state in the last year to lose jobs. And as we travel around the state and we talk to people about how they feel in terms of the direction that things are going, we hear consistently, we want more jobs, we want more opportunity. I had to send my son to Texas and my daughter to Oklahoma. And so we are laser focused right now at the Institute on our jobs and opportunity agenda, which outlines reform recommendations very similar to what Reset's working on. And this is the opportunity, this is the time to elevate the issues, and so excited to be here and commend you guys for talking about the things that are difficult.
Great, great. How many of us have had a relative or close friend who's moved out of state, particularly Texas, because they were seeking better opportunities there? How about that? Most folks here. That's what we're facing, isn't it? So try to deal with that. Well, that's all the time we have for this portion of our show. When we return, we'll be joined by a panel of experts to further discuss Reset Louisiana. Welcome back to Louisiana Public Square. Tonight we're discussing the Reset Louisiana agenda. Joining us now is our panel. Michael Olivier is CEO of the Louisiana Committee of 100 for Economic Development, a business roundtable comprised of statewide private sector CEOs and university presidents. Olivier served as Louisiana Economic Development Secretary from 2004 to 2008, and his organization is one of the partners of the Reset Initiative. Camille Conaway is the Senior Vice President of the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, or LABI, which represents more than 2,000 Louisiana employers. Conaway leads public policy and research initiatives and is currently focusing on workforce development from early childhood to adult education. Dr. James Richardson is the John Ray Alumni Professor of Economics at LSU's E.J. Orso College of Business Administration. Dr. Richardson served for 32 years on the Louisiana Revenue Estimating Conference, the panel which provides revenue estimates for the state. Dr. Richardson serves on the board of PAR. Eric Ponte is the Executive Director of the Louisiana Asphalt Pavement Association. He is also the president of the Louisiana Coalition to Fix Our Roads that advocates for improving roads and bridges. Ponte served 2 terms as a state representative from 2008 to 2015. Well, before we go to our audience questions, I'd first like to ask each of you from your own perspective, what does resetting Louisiana mean to you, and why is now a good time for us to be talking about that? And we'll start with you, Michael Olivier.
Well, the thing about Reset Louisiana is that we have the Business Roundtable of Louisiana called the Committee of 100 for Economic Development. And since 1992, our organization has been trying to work with public policy issues that affect business and industry. After all, we are the Business Roundtable of the state. We're not the State Chamber of Commerce, but what we are is a group of over 100 CEOs who want to make some changes in the state that will help us to be more competitive. This is the best time because we have 3 great organizations that have long histories of public policy gathering and public policy research. And what we're trying to do is to bring these 4 areas to the forefront so that during this election, when we have so many seats that are being contested because of term limits, we have more seats available than ever before. And so it's the right time to make a change. We need to make some differences in the 4 areas that have been outlined, from transportation to fiscal reform, to education, and of course in public safety. So our mission here is to work with our partners in this coalition and work with the new people who are coming into office, work with the incumbents who are coming into office to make sure that they understand that this is what we want, this is what the people want. We've got too many good things going on in the state to be ranked so low all the time.
Michael Olivier, yes, who was once the salesman for the state of Louisiana, so I know you know well how these issues are so important. Camille, Tell us a little bit about where Lobby is coming from.
Sure, and I have to echo a lot of what Mike just said. I think when I think of Reset Louisiana, I think of opportunity. I think of opportunity to make change. I don't think there's any one of us in Louisiana that thinks we don't have room to improve, whether we're talking about workforce development and better jobs or talking about the educational system. This particular moment, as Mike mentioned, with the term limited legislature, means we have a chance for 40 or 50 new elected officials to come into office. They're going to have new ideas. They're going to have new energy. It's a moment to seize that opportunity. So at Lobby, we're very excited to work with those new people from all over the state, from all walks of life, to see how we can improve the state that we love.
There's a big learning curve, but we think
Big
these are
learning
the
curve.
issues we hope that they're learning about.
That's right.
So, Dr. Richardson, what's reset mean to you?
Well, it means making policy, which we do every day, every month, every year. But I think obviously we will have a new set of legislators, very new, as Camille was saying. We'll be talking about issues, and each issue we talked about, as you were talking about before we got on stage, you talked about things like workforce development, about education, about roads. All of those things have a price tag. All of those things have to be paid for somehow. We have to either shift our resources around that we now have, or we have to have new resources. How are we going to pay for this? So it's a matter of, that's a very important question then. And then I think the other thing is, if we decide we need to shift our resources around, we can also shift our taxes around too. So do we set up a tax system that really allows us to be competitive nationally in terms of all businesses, also in terms of making it very good for citizens to live here and to have the services they want. And all of those things are all intertwined, and this is one of the reasons why it's hard. It's not as simple as we want to make it, but it's very hard because everything is complicated. As John was talking about the sales tax, it's very complicated. It's not a simple issue. There are a lot of little ins and outs you have to understand. And I think this is one of the elements where, as we work through our system, as we talk about to the new legislators, we can't give them just a type of a banner, reset, do this. They're not going to do that. They're going to want the details. And what's going to be important is to make sure we get the details right. We understand them, we explain them to people, and they understand the implications of those details.
Well, I hope they have an appetite for the details. We shall see. And I guess another advantage of tax reform is just the stability of the whole fiscal scene. That's part of what we want to see too. Eric Ponte, you're here with a very special perspective on reset.
I am, having served in the legislature and a business owner in the state for many years, of echoing the sentiments that everyone has said, that it's an important time, it's a critical time, because if our businesses can't thrive, without roads and bridges is a very important issue. It's our lifeblood of our state and our economy, whether you're trying to get to work, whether from our tax perspective, our businesses can't expand, employees can't get to work, health emergencies to get to a hospital, if you're gridlocked in traffic, or that rural bridge is closed, or farmers can't get their products to market, and it costs additional money, it affects our economy, it affects everyone. And it's been since 1984 since we've really invested 16 cents in our roads and bridges. It's past time, it's over time. As Dr. Richardson said, it comes at a cost, but it's important and it's critical because, as iterated here, we've got a high turnover. We saw it in 08, but it's more important now that we've got an extremely high turnover in the House and the Senate for the first time. And it's time that we visit with these elected officials, who soon to be elected officials and candidates, and reiterate the importance of moving our state forward. Roads are 48th, others are 49th and 50, as Michael Olivier said, and it's time that we don't take this for granted, and it's time we move ourselves forward. Just in transportation, every southern state has improved funding for roads and bridges, not Louisiana, and it's time we fix our lifeblood. Our lives depend on it.
Yeah, and when we've gone around the state, we've seen people in all the areas talking about the need for better infrastructure, farmers not being able to get their produce to market, and so on. It's not just a South Louisiana issue. We have found that it's a statewide issue. Well, I want to ask John Weibel to jump in here. I know you had a question that you wanted to ask our panelists. It's your turn, John.
Sure, thank you. John Weibel, President, Louisiana Research Center for Development and Learning. We're really excited about the reset agenda. because of a number of reasons, but one, because of the focus it puts on education. And I think all of us here this evening know that we have to fix education to be able to fix Louisiana. We know prosperous states, prosperous communities have quality public education. One of the core issues in education is, according to the National Assessment of Education Progress, less than 30% of third graders in Louisiana are reading on grade level. We feel that's a fundamental issue that we have to correct to be able to have the skilled labor, all of the workforce, the economic development. What are some things that we can do as a state to invest in that, knowing that 50% of our children are coming from impoverished homes into our schools?
John, in your own words, you put it into succinctly what it is.
Yep.
It's a workforce issue. That's it. And so we've got to start them young. We have to, and we proved that the LA4 program, which is a program that starts training 4-year-olds and people who don't have access to early pre-K training, we need to do it at the third grade level, at the 3-year-old level. We need to do it from birth to 3. We need to do it as early as possible, and we need to start funding these things. Our funding has not been adequate enough to get to those people. And you know what? Those people whose kids get the access, they go to the workforce. They can go to the workforce because their kids are being taken care of and they're learning. And it's a poverty thing. So all of it's intertwined. We can do better.
Ms. Conaway, do you want to take a shot at that question too?
I agree with what Mike said and with what you said. Early childhood education is going to be critical to that. Early intervention and literacy is critical, and I know that the State Board of Education is looking at innovative ways, innovative policies to help drive that. We're all concerned, and I think you've seen the State Board take a lot of steps in recent years to try to address that. You're seeing them raise the bar on what proficient is in reading, which can be a challenge for our schools and for us as parents and for our kids, but it's the right thing to do. If kids can't read, they can't do math. They're not going to succeed in 3rd grade, they won't succeed in 8th grade. And so I think that the intention is right. I think everyone agrees on the problem, and I think we can come together to find solutions such as quality childcare and early interventions for literacy.
Hang on, Jim. Let me go to Roger, who has a question. And Ms. Conaway, stay on the edge of your seat because I think his question is for you. Roger, tell us who you're with and give us your question.
Roger Badgeron. I'm with the Louisiana Uniform Local Sales Tax Board, a fairly new creation of the legislature, with our mission being to promote uniformity and efficiency in local sales tax collections. Sales tax has been my area for over 30 years. One of the things we have to face as local and state collectors is the complexity of Louisiana sales tax law. And I can't help but think a big contributing factor to that complexity is the fact that there are over 200 exemptions on the books. Those exemptions affect both in-state and out-of-state retailers. It affects businesses because they have to know what the rules are. My question is, would Reset, business and industry in general, support legislation that would require exemptions to be re-examined periodically, 2, 3, 4 years, one, to determine have they performed what their ultimate purpose was.
Yeah, and I think what we have now is 100 of those exemptions. It's mind-boggling to think that there are 200 exemptions to the sales tax, but 100 of those are temporarily set aside, and they'll come back. It'll be interesting to see what the legislature does, but let's let Ms. Conaway try to answer that question.
Sure, and Dr. Richardson.
Yeah, Dr. Richardson too, I'm sure, would love that.
His area.
Go ahead.
I think the answer is yes, absolutely. A simple tax system is what we're all looking for, and in the last 3 or 4 years, you've seen a detailed examination of exemption by the legislative committees, many of which business and industry did not weigh in on. And I would distinguish, I think, on behalf of LAVI, the difference between an exemption and generally accepted what is good or bad tax policy. So some of those things are an exemption in the statute, but maybe 40 other states don't ever tax that to begin with. And so there is a difference, I think, between certain types of exemptions, which are really just good tax policy, aligning us with other states, and exemptions like Mardi Gras beads, where maybe these are taxable items. Things
Some are
that we should be
competitive
taxing.
issues.
Some are competitive issues that really relate to
How about you, Dr.
what is good tax
Richardson?
policy.
I know you've.
I think element on state and local gets even more complicated because the state has exemptions, but each local government could have exemptions of its own as well. And that complicates the world a great deal. I would love to see a centralized sales tax where that means the exemptions for the state and the locals are the same. We have the same tax base.
How about uniform?
Uniform
Yeah,
tax.
right.
And that's what we would like. However, to get there is going to take a lot of work, as you know. And also, it's not going to be done overnight. It's going to take us 3, 4, 5, 6 years to do it well. Because once we start changing things, we affect people we really don't know we're affecting. Some may be better off. Some local governments may get a little extra money. Some may lose, and we don't really know who they are right now, to be honest.
And this is such an important crossover issue between the state and local government. And that's why I want to call on Guy right now to jump into this part of the conversation. Guy, tell everybody who you are and then hit us with a question.
Sure. Guy Cormier with the Police Jury Association. I'm an executive director there, but prior to that I was a parish president, so I wore that elected hat for a little while in St. Martin Parish. And so just kind of on the heels of that, number one, let me say thank you to all three, the Committee of 100, the PAR and Cable for getting together, and I've looked at their board of directors and have some tremendously talented people serving and want what's best for Louisiana. Just like my folks that serve on a local, everyday basis, police jurors and parish presidents, parish councilmen, want what's best for the citizens of Louisiana. But this central sales tax collection issue has been brought up time and time again, where there's really no, and just like this committee report, there's really been no local input from the tax collectors and from the parishes and from the school boards, the people that actually rely on this money. There's really been no participation in getting what we think we need at the table, and I just hope that this conversation can continue. And I will say this: we have a revenue estimating conference that's set, and we look at revenue. We need to have a tax exemption revenue committee that
Right.
you know that often maybe meets on a quarterly basis to just review these things. It doesn't make sense that we're looking at revenues coming in, but we're not looking at revenues that we're exempting.
We need to take a closer look at all those exemptions and what those costs are. Yes, go ahead, Dr. Richardson.
We do look at the investment expenditures we make in terms of the credits that we give. That we do look at that, but we don't really have once they're in statute, they're law. So you have the right to take credit if you want to, or if that fits your particular financial situation. But I think in the element of, I agree on the exemptions. It's something, we've had a lot of study committees, and almost everyone you have will tell you, get the exemptions out of the way and get the rate just as low as possible. And almost every economist will tell you that. It doesn't matter if that economist is conservative or liberal, it doesn't matter. That's what they tell you, that's what we should do. And we try to do that. But again, the exemptions, somebody likes them. That's why they're there.
Yeah, and we also, but a lot of people don't like the fact that we have the third highest combined state and local sales tax in the country. And actually, we're really tied for first, to be honest, because they're so close.
We're not against exemptions.
Yeah, that's right.
They support us tremendously.
Yes. Let's bring a business perspective in. Wayne, why don't you tell us who you are?
I'm Wayne Brown. I have a family business, Brown Builders. I'm a builder developer. We're almost a 50-year-old company and located headquarters in Shreveport and Bossier. We work statewide. So all these reforms are really important to us. I also serve on the Committee of 100, so we've been involved in developing this. We appreciate all the support and LPB putting on this program for information. I'm encouraged by all the support I'm hearing from the group on these reforms that we're all working with PAR and Cable on. I also serve as a board member for the LSU Board of Supervisors. So higher education hadn't been mentioned, but I'd like to bring that up. I'm very hopeful we could restore our funding for higher education to the levels in the Foster administration, where we were in the middle of SEC with our state contributions to the higher education, our teachers were paid. Now we're at the bottom. I think we're along with Mississippi, but we can do better than that, and there's such needs in our state. When we're doing a lot with what we have, but I think we can.
Well, let's bring the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, into those comparisons too. I think we should be comparing them all. Do you have a question?
Well, what can we do, and Ms. Conway and Mr. Olivier, with the legislature, where they could work in a bipartisan way to fund our higher education, so we can pay our teachers and take care of our buildings? We have huge amounts of deferred maintenance, billions of dollars.
That's right. I think as you've seen the fiscal outlook improve in the last couple of years, there has been bipartisan support to fund higher education and the needs that we have. And so I'm optimistic about that. I think what you see more often in the legislature is they're looking for better outcomes at the same time. They're looking for higher graduation rates, higher retention rates, for kids to graduate with credentials where they can go to a job right away. And what I'm really encouraged about is to see the Board of Regents and others really taking the lead, our community college system, trying some very innovative things that people are talking about around the country to try to get people that are out of work back into the classroom, get a skill, get a credential, get a degree that's going to put those folks to work. So I think we have a lot to be optimistic about in the future for higher education.
And the Board of Regents has just released their long-term strategy, which has been lauded by Moody's ratings service. Well, that makes a difference. You know, we have to understand that higher education is critically important to the workforce. It's important to our economic base, but it helps us across the board with so many other areas. Here we have a rating agency that rates our bonds, that's looking at our education system and saying, that's awesome, keep it up, go for it. 60% is a big number, but if you can achieve that from where you are at the 40s, that's going to make a difference.
Well, I read that Moody's report, and it also had a few things to say about our bonding on highway construction. And it isn't too happy about that. Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about where we are with the outlook at that? And you had a particular approach to trying to generate more activity for roads and bridges. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, again, as I had mentioned earlier, it was 1984 when 16 cents was passed to fund our roads and bridges, and here we are, 2019, and we're at 16 cents, which basically buys us 6 cents. And we have 39,000 lane miles of highways in our state, and we're trying to maintain it with 6 cents. So we took a new approach. We formed what is called the Louisiana Coalition to Fix Our Roads. Basically, at this point, about 100 businesses, chambers of commerces, and associations from around the state have band together. We're 48th in the country. This year alone, 37 bridges are closed. We have bridges closed from last year and the year before. There's no money to open them.
And it's not just bridges closed. A lot of bridges, they reduce the amount of weight you could put on them. So effectively speaking, for some businesses, those bridges are closed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You're right. The load capacity has been decreased to where mainly farmers' school buses. Our children, especially in rural areas, these school buses have to go an hour out of their way, going to school and coming back. And do you want your child on that school bus the next time that bridge does fail? Because we have had bridges fail this year with equipment passing it. So the coalition got together and to come up with ideas and solutions, and it felt it important that the citizens of the state understand how dire and how bad and how unsafe our roads and conditions. So we're doing a statewide effort to inform the citizens, working together of how bad things are.
Let me ask you this, and I'll let Doreen or Chance, jump in here on this issue. But when I drove to Texas recently, and my gosh, there are tolls everywhere, and they're not just paying for the road you're on, they're just getting revenue from you, for that whole region. And I was in Orlando recently, and I think almost every major road has a toll on it. Why not tolls in Louisiana? How would that work? And I wonder if maybe Chance and Doreen might have some thoughts on that.
I'd be happy to go first.
Okay.
So, with respect to tolling in Louisiana, frankly, there's not enough traffic volume to generate sufficient dollars to build structures in Louisiana, except for a couple locations, perhaps a new I-10 bridge in Lake Charles. So we're very limited as far as where tolling could actually help finance a structure. From a trucking perspective, we oppose tolls. We support a fuel tax. That's where we are, but even among the advocates for increased revenue, there's disagreement over that. And I'd quickly say, from our perspective, tolling is not the most conservative approach, because you're taking, you have to pay back a private investor, you have to have the tolling infrastructure and billing. The fuel tax has less admin cost as far as
But
collection.
it seems to be spreading in a lot of other states. Doreen?
Right. I think where Louisiana is at least looking now are alternative methods for funding. So they're looking at public-private partnerships, which often rely on tolls, whether you're looking at a gas tax, you're looking at a usage fee, but there's got to be a source of funding that's sustainable. You just can't rely on a one infusions. There's been great effort to put some surplus dollars towards some infrastructure projects, and that's fantastic. But that's just nibbling around the edges. That's not going to build a bridge across the Mississippi and Baton Rouge. It's not going to take care of the Belle Chase Tunnel and bridge. It's not going to take care of Lake Charles. And so I think the state and DOTD is trying to get creative, but it's still going to require some revenue source that's going to sustain this infrastructure, because we don't want to do what we've done. We have $12 billion backlog on current projects and $15 billion we need for new projects. So we don't want to build things we can't take care of.
Yeah, what we have is old and aging and needs work, and plus there's a lot of stuff we don't have that we need to have. So Eric, do you want to close out on that?
Well, and to those points is we've been fortunate that we've had a surplus in our budget. Louisiana, we fail to make match, which almost happened this year. We lose $700 million of our tax dollars from the federal government. Next year, with the dollars that are generated, we are going to have to rely on a surplus again to make match next year, and making match is pulling down federal dollars. The next year will be $780 million, and we were fortunate this past year with surplus that we were actually able to get other states' dollars that they weren't able to use. But again, it's a Band-Aid approach. We have a $26 billion problem. The $700 million BP, the P3s, the Garveys, all those are great, but it's time to reset and to look at this. And it's been 35 years, and it's time that we do something. And it's the only way that we're just going to get us, the 26 million gets us back to where we need to be. It doesn't get us ahead, it just gets us back and pulls us off of 48.
Sounds like we need a reset.
There you go.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How about Mr. Robert Burns up here? You've been an observer of the political scene for a good long while. Tell us a little bit about yourself and give the panel a question.
I have been. I am Robert Burns. I'm a video blogger, founded the video blog Sound Off Louisiana. Welcome anybody to go visit it. Louisiana ranks near the very top of licensing for some very low-wage occupations. It's the only state to license florists. It's one of only 3 states to license interior designers. The Institute for Justice, which is a nonprofit organization in Virginia, which regularly sues state bodies over infringements of the rights to, for instance, make a living, have sued the boards or the commissions that oversee this licensing. It most recently sued the Cosmetology Board over something as simple as hair braiding, which requires you to have 500 hours, and there's no school that even offers the program except for one in Monroe. So I'd like to ask the panel, how much focus do you think needs to be placed in the upcoming future session, future governor, toward rolling back many of these licensing requirements that in reality don't protect the public, but in effect serve as barriers to entry? They suppress upward mobility, and in reality, in many instances, they constitute trade unions in a supposed right-to-work state, and we lead the nation in that.
And that's a great question, and I can think Ms. Connie wants to answer, but why don't we let Allie also answer this, because I know the Pelican Institute has quite a few views on this. Allie?
Yeah, and I think you cited it a minute ago. The Archbridge Institute did a study in terms of low-wage occupational licensure, how it directly affects and inhibits upward mobility. And so when you're in a state that has poverty rates, some of the worst in the nation, you would think there might be some correlation there.
So we're an outlier when it comes to licensing professional. Ms. Conaway.
This is something, of all the things that you see entrenched in the legislature, you would think you would be able to remove something like an occupational license for hair braiding. We have supported that legislation multiple years in a row, and it has failed multiple years in a row. Arbitrary obstacles to employment are something the next legislature must address. There's simply no good reason for that, and one of the most important areas where we've worked on this issue is in reentry. When former offenders are reentering society and we have licensing barriers all over the place, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So there are some very simple things that should be simple, that when we do this reset, need to be part of that next.
And we're talking about the
agenda.
challenges facing people, especially on the low income level, and there's a lot of challenges they face. Jamie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization, and I know you have a question for the panel.
Yeah, I'm Jamie Carson with the Louisiana Budget Project. In Louisiana, there are wide disparities between poverty and income between black and white households. There's even a wider disparity with wealth. Much of this can be rooted in the state's history of segregation that created barriers to economic opportunity for people of color. And I'm just wondering, what can the Reset agenda do, in your opinion, to address this issue?
Mike, do you want to take on that question?
Well, that's a big one. That's definitely a big one. And so because of the levels of poverty that we have, we've got to attend to these things. And it's all, again, it comes right back, poverty, education, workforce, all of it. What we've been talking about is leading us to having a better opportunity for everyone to compete. And that's what it is. Look, it's all going to be incremental as we make the changes, but we have to keep doing what you're saying, and that is making people aware, giving people opportunities to know what can be done, offering to the legislature solutions. Don't just tell them go do it, but solutions and support. You know, that's the big thing. When we decided we were going to launch into this thing, first, we're nonpartisan. We want to see some good things done in Louisiana, and we want to tell the legislators we're not going to be averse to what you're doing. We're going to be your supporter. We're going to give you cover. We want you to introduce bills, vote for bills, call off the bills, do all of the things that need to be done to make the changes. And I think that's the biggest thing we can do, is tell people what we need, what we want to see done, and then help them as they find the solutions, or help give them the solutions.
And Dr. Richardson, you've given a lot of thought and study to income disparity. I wonder if you could reflect a little bit about that and what that means to Louisiana, and what we can do about it.
Well, first, to be honest, Jamie, it's not going to happen in the next 4 years. It may not happen in the next it may take 20 years. You're talking, and indeed, everything we're talking about tonight, the roads, the infrastructure, the maintenance buildings at universities, all of that we're talking about a long-term goals, long-term outcomes. We better be patient. If we think that this legislature in its first term in office is going to solve all these problems, we're kind of kidding ourselves. So I think the first thing we have to be careful, but we have to, if we don't start today though, we'll never get there.
Nothing happens while we wait.
That's right. We've got to start. And some of the things that Mike's talking about, the educational side, that's critical. But then some of the things we were talking about before, some of the crazy rules we have, we can take care of that pretty fast. Those things, we can take care of the crazy rules very quickly, but we have to have the political will. Because let me tell you, working with the florist or the braiders, that's not going to look like a high-profile issue. It's going to be a low profile, it's just barely sneaking through, and it's going to be easy to defeat.
Well, I think, focusing on opportunity is a lot of what we're talking about here, and making sure people have those opportunities. But I think also focusing on any institutions that have any barriers, any racial barriers in there. That's also something we have to look at. Institutions in all their forms. And that's something we need to continue to dig in and to be aware of if we're going to help solve the problem you're talking about. We're talking about economic development, and I want John Gallagher, the Municipal Association, to talk a little bit about that. We've been talking about the state view of economic development. When I travel around the state, there are cities that are really doing pretty well, and there are some other towns, municipalities that are really struggling. And I really wonder if that's the future of Louisiana. Can we do something for economic development for these local governments, these local areas around the state? And I wonder if you could reflect on that.
Yeah, there is. We have some that are doing very well. We have some that due to, and sometimes I see it as no fault of their own. You had some back in the 70s, 80s that were just along Highway 1 that were just blowing and going. And when I-49 came along, it was rerouted away and just took the lifeblood out of those. When the timber industry kind of went down and your mills started closing. I think Spring Hill's an example. It's a thriving town, and now with the mills closing. And a lot of these are through no fault of their own. And I hear the legislature say, small towns need to go away. That I find very, very hard to swallow, because these people, they're the folks, the citizens, they're very proud of where they live. We're currently looking at where teaming with a podcast company. We're going to start featuring a lot of these small towns because they have some great stories to tell, and you're going to start hearing a lot more.
What's the key
about
to
that.
success for these small towns? What needs to happen? I hear you taking a lot of things maybe taken away from them, but what do they need? What can they do?
I think focusing and working with the state, with USD, you're seeing a lot of the failing infrastructure in the water systems, and working with, and I've sit on the Rural Water Infrastructure Committee along with Guy, and we're working with a lot of these smaller communities, smaller water systems about consolidating, helping them work through the USDA, Delta Region Authority.
Is the state doing enough?
I think the state, we can't, I don't think we can't just say, hey, state, we need another St. Joseph building a water system. I think the locals need to, and we need to, as a group, look and consider, if you need to raise your water rates. I know USDA, Delta Region, getting these grants, in order now to apply, you have to raise your water rates to be sustainable, and look at consolidation. And we're working with the Department of Economic Development on program to try to get. There was an article in the New York Times yesterday about rural communities are starting to come to life. There's kind of a homecoming.
It's absolutely
so
critical.
That's what we're striving
It's
for.
the economic development challenge maybe of our age, especially in the rural areas. Doreen, you were saying,
I just wanted to add, for my industry, we work a lot with small communities trying to find innovative solutions to those challenges. And so I think we need to look at financing, look at just what systems can do, what's cutting edge that an investment early on can reap benefits long term, so that you're not having so much maintenance. And so I think there just needs to be a...
Okay, well, we've got just a little bit of time, but you got to be really short. You have one sentence to close out. What is the one thing you want everybody to take away from this tonight? Mike Olivier, go.
Well, they've got to ask their elected officials, the people who are running for office, where do you stand on these 4 issues?
There you go.
And what can you do?
Ms. Conaway, next.
What small towns and large towns need are jobs. That's what'll keep our kids here. We have to
Amen.
create a state where they can find a job.
Dr. Richardson.
Every problem we have is not something created in the last year or last 2 years. It's been created over 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years. It's going to take that long to solve them. We need to be innovative. We need to be on the go, do it now, start right now, but we also need to be patient in terms of looking for outcomes.
But we can't keep blaming Earl Long. Okay, and Eric Ponte.
I didn't go back that far.
Again, these problems have been around forever. We've started the conversation. We've engaged the conversation. We need to keep the conversation in front of our elected officials and force action and demand results, because we all pay the price if we don't.
Great deal. Okay, well, we've run out of time for our question and answer segment. We'd like to thank our panelists, Mr. Olivier, Ms. Conaway, Dr. Richardson, and Mr. Ponte for their insight on this month's topic. And when we come back, we'll have a few closing comments.
Well, a wonderful conversation. I think we all need patience, something I'm short of most of the time.
No, we just demonstrated we could have a productive conversation. No fights broke out. It was a pretty good deal.
Well, and I want to remind everybody, and I know everyone in this audience knows that, but certainly early voting begins on the 28th, right around the corner. So I hope that everyone participates in a democracy, and that's what we need.
Please get out and vote.
Absolutely.
We need to do that. So.
Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of Louisiana Public Square. We encourage you to visit our website at lpb.org/public square. You'll find a link there to the reset proposals, plus voting information from the Secretary of State's website. If you want to comment on tonight's show, click the Join the Conversation tab. We would love to hear from you.
Well, according to a study released last year, Louisiana ranks among the top 3 states most vulnerable in a trade war with China. Join Louisiana Public Square next month as it travels to Alexandria, Louisiana to explore the state's winners and losers in the economic conflict on tariff tensions, October 23rd. Well, thanks for watching and good night.
Good night, everyone.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org.